Hi, Donovan. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I don't know who else to turn to. Last week, I caught something on my backyard security camera that I can't explain. It was a little after 2 a.m. when my motion sensor tripped. I pulled up the live feed on my phone, thinking maybe it was a raccoon or a stray cat. But what I saw froze me in place. There was something standing under the tree at the edge of my yard. It wasn't tall, maybe 3 or 4 feet. Thin, with a head too large for its body. Its skin looked smooth, almost shiny, and in the glare of the camera light it reminded me of a lizard. What really terrified me were the eyes. They were completely black. No reflection, no blink. Just 2 empty voids staring toward the house. For a long moment, it didn't move. It just stood there, like it was listening. Then it tilted its head in this jerky, unnatural way, like a bird trying to study something. That's when I realized it wasn't looking around. It was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. The next morning, I checked the yard. The ground was damp from rain, and I found small prints near the back steps. Not human, not animal either. Almost like a 3-toed claw mark pressed into the mud. Since that night, things haven't felt right. My motion lights keep flicking on, even though nothing's there. My dog refuses to go into the yard after dark. She just stands at the door and growls. Twice now, I've heard tapping on the windows when I know no one was outside. Just slow, deliberate taps. When I look, there's nothing. But I can't shake the feeling that something is still out there, circling the house. It's not just at night anymore. During the day, I've started to notice little things that don't add up. The back gate is left open when I know I locked it. My trash cans have been moved, not knocked over like an animal would, but slid a few feet across the pavement. Even the garden tools I keep against the shed have been scattered in the grass, as if something or someone was inspecting them. At first, I told myself it could be the wind, or maybe raccoons. But the pattern is too deliberate, too careful. It feels less like random nuisance and more like someone marking their presence. What unsettles me most is the silence. Normally, the nights here are alive with sound. Crickets, owls, the occasional car rolling past. But when that thing is near, everything goes dead quiet. The kind of silence that makes the air feel heavy, like the world itself is holding its breath. One night, I stayed up in the living room, determined to catch it. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the gravel shift near the driveway. Then came the sound, tapping again, only this time against the siding. Slow, scraping drags, like a claw tracing the wall. I wanted to pull the curtain back, to see it with my own eyes, but I couldn't move. My body locked up, like some part of me knew that if I looked directly at it, something terrible would happen. Eventually, the sound faded, but I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I checked the spot. 3 long scratches ran across the siding beneath the window, thin and deep. Too sharp for any animal I know. Too precise for some kid with a stick. Since then, the noises have moved inside, or at least it feels that way. A floorboard creaks in the hallway when no one's there. Something brushes against the wall in the dead of night. I leave the lights on, but it doesn't help. The shadows just seem darker, as if something waits in them. My dog senses it too. She growls at the back door almost every night, her ears pinned flat, trembling so hard her nails scrape the floor. Once, she even refused to go outside at all. She's never been like this before. I haven't told anyone. They'd laugh, call me paranoid. But I know what I've seen. I know what I've heard. Something keeps coming back here, again and again, and it has no intention of leaving. I can feel it drawing closer. The taps, the scratches, the silence. They're not accidents. They're warnings. Or worse, games. I just don't know how much longer I can endure it. All right, imagine it's midday, and there's this bustling spot near the Aztec ruins. It's a mix of tourists and locals, some wandering around, snapping pictures, others just taking in the history of the place. The sun's high, casting strong shadows against the ruins. Out of nowhere, people start to notice something unusual in the sky. A figure coming down fast, almost like it's falling. At first, it looks like some kind of bird, but as it gets closer, People see it's much, much larger. Then, with a sudden jolt, it lands right on the edge of the crowd. Everyone backs up, speechless. Standing before them is a creature that looks almost human. With a body so thin and bony, you can see every rib. Its skin this strange bronze color that glints in the sun. But it's those wings that really grab attention. Huge, feathery, almost angel-like, but clearly worn and damaged. Its face is the strangest of all. No whites in its eyes, just deep, empty blackness. It stands there swaying, its wings drooping down, and people aren't sure if it's even alive. Some are snapping pictures, others just staring, completely stunned. It takes a shaky breath, as if it's struggling just to stay upright. Everyone around can see it's hurt badly, too weak to do much of anything. For a while it seems like that's it. It's just going to collapse. But then, slowly, it starts moving those massive wings. With a bit of struggle, it lifts its head and looks around, like it's sizing up the crowd. And then, in a single powerful burst, it pushes off the ground, wings beating hard, and lifts itself into the sky. The crowd watches in awe as it flies away, eventually disappearing over the ruins, leaving everyone there in stunned silence. People talk about it for the rest of the day, some saying it was an angel, others calling it a spirit or some ancient being from the Aztec legends. But no one's quite sure what they saw, only that they'll never forget it. James E. Tedford was a quiet, unassuming man who lived a simple life. He was a World War II veteran and was 68 years old in 1949. He had settled into a routine that suited him well. After the war, he and his wife lived in Franklin, Vermont, but life took a strange turn when his wife, Pearl, disappeared. No one knew what happened to her. James returned home one day, and she was simply gone. Her clothes and personal belongings were still in the house, but she had vanished without a trace. This was the first odd event in what would become an even more bizarre series of events. After Pearl's disappearance, James moved into a retirement home for veterans in Bennington, Vermont. He didn't seem overly upset about Pearl's disappearance, or if he was, he kept it to himself. Maybe he thought she had left him, or maybe he just didn't want to talk about it. In any case, James was a reserved man who mostly kept to himself. On December 1st, 1949, exactly 3 years after Paula Jean Weldon's disappearance, James Tedford also vanished under mysterious circumstances. His case, however, was even stranger. James had been visiting relatives in St. Albans, Vermont, and was returning to Bennington by bus. He boarded the bus, ticket in hand, and took his seat for the long ride back. Several witnesses saw him on the bus, and nothing seemed unusual. He was just an elderly man on a quiet bus ride through the rural backroads of Vermont. The bus route from St. Albans to Bennington was a well-traveled one, winding through small towns and the forested hills that surround the region. It was late afternoon, and as the bus rolled along, passengers chatted or dozed off. James sat quietly, gazing out the window. As the bus approached Bennington, it made several stops along the way, and each time, James was still there, sitting in his seat. But when the bus finally arrived in Bennington, James Tedford was gone. His luggage was still in the overhead rack. His bus ticket was on the seat, and his personal items were untouched. There was no sign of struggle, no indication that anything out of the ordinary had happened. It was as if James had simply vanished into thin air while the bus was moving. The bus driver and the other passengers were baffled. Several of them remembered seeing him just a few stops earlier, and no one recalled him getting off the bus. In fact, witnesses claimed he was still in his seat after the last stop before Bennington, which made his disappearance all the more perplexing. How could an elderly man just disappear from a moving bus without anyone noticing? Authorities were called, and an investigation began, but there were no leads. The bus had been on a straightforward route, with no unusual stops or detours. The driver and passengers were questioned multiple times, but no one could provide any answers. James Tedford had simply vanished while en route to his destination. One theory suggested that Tedford might have wandered off the bus unnoticed during one of the stops. But this seemed unlikely. He was elderly and not in the best of health. If he had gotten off, someone surely would have seen him. And even if he had, where would he have gone? There were no reports of anyone matching his description in any of the small towns the bus had passed through. Another theory, more popular among locals, was that something supernatural was at play. This was the third mysterious disappearance in the Bennington area in just 4 years. First, there was Mitty Rivers, an experienced hunter who vanished in 1945. Then, Paula Jean Weldon disappeared in 1946 while hiking on the Long Trail. Now, James Tedford had gone missing under even more bizarre circumstances. People in Bennington were starting to wonder if the area itself was cursed. Over the years, the idea of the Bennington Triangle began to take hold, fueled by these disappearances and the strange nature of the cases. Tedford's case, in particular, captured people's imaginations. How does someone vanish from a moving bus? Was he taken by someone or something along the way? Was there a rational explanation that no one had thought of? The search for Tedford didn't last long. There were no clues, no evidence to follow. His disappearance was added to the growing list of strange events in the area, but like the others, it remained unsolved. His relatives in St. Albans were just as confused as everyone else. Tedford had been in good spirits when he left their home, looking forward to returning to his quiet life in Bennington. There was no reason for him to simply walk away. The mystery of James Tedford's disappearance became a local legend, often retold in hushed tones around campfires or in diners. Some people speculated that the disappearances in the Bennington Triangle were linked to the area's history, which included strange occurrences dating back to the Native Americans who once inhabited the region. Others believed there might be a natural explanation, like an undiscovered cave system or some kind of geographical anomaly. There were even those who thought Tedford's disappearance might have been connected to his wife's earlier vanishing. After all, it was odd that both James and Pearl had gone missing under unusual circumstances just a few years apart. But without any evidence, these ideas remain speculative. In the decades since James Tedford's disappearance, no new leads have emerged. His case, like so many others in the Bennington Triangle, remains a cold mystery. Despite advances in technology and investigative techniques, there's still no explanation for what happened to him that day on the bus. Today, the story of James E. Tedford is one of the most famous disappearances in Vermont history, often mentioned alongside other strange vanishings in the Bennington Triangle. His name, like those of Paula Jean Weldon and Mitty Rivers, has become part of local folklore, a reminder of the unexplained mysteries that still haunt the forests and back roads of rural Vermont. As the years go by, the details of Tedford's life and disappearance have blurred into legend, but the basic facts remain. An elderly man boarded a bus one cold December afternoon, heading home to Bennington, and was never seen again. No one knows where he went, how he vanished, or why, and that mystery continues to captivate those who hear his story. Officer Mark Whitfield had been with the Washington State Police Department for nearly 15 years. He was used to working the night shifts, patrolling the rural highways and back roads that crisscrossed the Olympic Peninsula. It wasn't a glamorous job, but he liked the quietness of the woods and the solitude of driving through the deep, dark forests that stretched out on either side of the roads. However, there was one stretch of Route 112 near Clallam Bay that always made him feel uneasy. It wasn't a place that scared him exactly, more like it had a heavy atmosphere, the kind of spot that makes you glance in the rearview mirror just to check what might be there. It was early October, and the Pacific Northwest had just begun to settle into its rainy season. Thick, low-hanging clouds turned the daylight into a dull gray, and by 6 p.m., darkness had already started to creep in. Officer Whitfield had just completed a routine traffic stop on the main highway when a call came in over the radio. A truck driver reported something strange on a narrow, forested back road. The voice on the radio was calm, but had an edge of nervousness that caught Whitfield's attention. The driver had said something about a large animal running across the road in front of his vehicle. It wasn't an uncommon report for this area. There were plenty of bears, elk, and other wildlife around. But the dispatcher's tone suggested this was different. Whitfield took the call, responding with his usual dry, "Copy that, en route." He flipped on his patrol car's lights and turned onto the side road the trucker had mentioned. The rain had started to pick up, pattering against the windshield and blurring the world outside. He squinted into the darkness, the beams from his headlights cutting through the mist that clung to the dense pine forest lining the road. He reached the spot the trucker had indicated and slowed the car to a crawl. It was a narrow, winding road, barely wide enough for two vehicles to pass. On either side, towering trees and underbrush closed in, leaving little room for anything large to move without being seen. Whitfield pulled over to the shoulder, the crunch of gravel under the tires barely audible over the sound of the rain. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out, scanning the area. There were no immediate signs of an animal crossing, no tracks in the muddy earth at the edge of the road. The air smelled of wet pine and earth, nothing unusual. He moved a few feet into the trees, sweeping his flashlight across the undergrowth when he saw it, a faint trail of broken branches and flattened ferns, leading deeper into the woods. Whitfield hesitated. It wasn't standard protocol to go chasing after animals in the middle of the night, especially in the thick forests where visibility was almost zero. But curiosity got the better of him. The trucker had seemed genuinely shaken, and that was enough to make him want to take a closer look. He followed the trail cautiously, stepping over roots and ducking under low branches. The beam of his flashlight bounced off the wet leaves, creating shifting shadows that made it hard to focus on anything for too long. He'd gone about 20 yards into the forest when he heard it, a low, guttural sound, almost like a growl but deeper, more resonant. It came from somewhere ahead, maybe 30 or 40 feet away. Whitfield stopped, his hand moving instinctively to the side of his belt, where his service weapon was holstered. He stood still, listening, but the sound didn't repeat. Instead, there was a rustling noise, followed by the distinct crack of a branch snapping. Slowly, he lifted his flashlight, aiming it toward the noise. For a moment, the light caught on something, a shape partially hidden by the dense foliage. His first thought was that it was a bear, but something about its silhouette was wrong. It was hunched over, with a long, low body and limbs that didn't quite seem to fit. The creature shifted slightly, and Whitfield caught a glimpse of its head. His stomach tightened. The eyes were what struck him first. Large, too large, reflecting the flashlight's beam with an eerie, almost reddish glow. Whitfield couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. The head was elongated, almost canine, but the body was all wrong. It looked as though someone had pieced together parts of different animals. The creature was still for a moment, then began to move, slinking backward into the shadows in a way that was terrifying. In a few seconds, it had vanished into the darkness, leaving behind only the rustling of disturbed branches. Whitfield backed away, keeping his flashlight trained on the spot where the creature had disappeared. His mind raced, trying to identify what he'd seen. A bear with mange? An injured wolf? None of those explanations fit. He reached the edge of the road and quickly got back into his patrol car, locking the doors out of an instinctual fear he hadn't felt in years. Sitting there, hands gripping the steering wheel, he realized he was holding his breath. Slowly, he exhaled, shaking his head as if to clear it. He grabbed the radio and reported back to dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've checked the area. There's something out here. Can't confirm what it is. No immediate danger to the public, but it's definitely not normal wildlife." The radio crackled as the dispatcher responded. "Copy that, Unit 12. Return to base. We'll make a note of the sighting and pass it to Fish and Wildlife." "Roger that," Whitfield replied, already turning the car around to head back to the highway. As he drove away, he kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the creature darting across the road behind him. But there was nothing, just the blur of rain and trees. Over the next few days, he shared the encounter with a few fellow officers. Most nodded, listening with polite skepticism, chalking it up to a trick of the light, the stress of night shifts, or even a bear with an odd gait. But a couple of the older officers exchanged glances, their expressions tightening. Later, one of them pulled Whitfield aside and quietly mentioned that strange sightings had been reported in that area before, going back decades. "The woods here," the older officer said, "aren't like other places. Some things just don't want to be found." Whitfield never went back to that road without feeling a knot in his stomach. He continued his patrols, continued answering calls and doing his job, but that night stayed with him. Every time he drove through the forest around Clallam Bay, he felt a prickling at the back of his neck, a sense that the woods held secrets he would rather not uncover. Paula Jean Weldon was like any other college student, full of energy and curiosity about life. She was 18, a sophomore at Bennington College in Vermont, and always looking for a little adventure. On Sunday, December 1st, 1946, she decided to take a break from studying for her exams and head out for a hike on the long trail. It was a cold but clear day, and she was eager to get out and stretch her legs after spending so much time indoors. Paula wasn't much of an outdoors expert, but she'd done a bit of hiking before and figured the long trail would be a nice way to clear her head. It was a popular spot, well marked, and just a short distance from campus. She told her roommate and a few friends that she was going for a hike, but she didn't give any specific details about when she'd be back. This wasn't unusual. Paula was independent, confident, and known to be a bit spontaneous. She didn't always stick to rigid plans. She had invited them to join her, but they were all busy with classes and homework that day. That afternoon, she left her dorm wearing a coat, jeans, and light sneakers, with no additional gear. The outfit wasn't exactly ideal for a long hike in December, but Paula wasn't planning to be gone for very long. She wasn't carrying much with her. No map, no supplies, and certainly no heavy winter gear. It was just a quick, casual walk, or so she thought. Paula hitchhiked to the trailhead, which was only a few miles away. A local man named Louis Knapp gave her a ride and dropped her off near Bickford Hollow, an entrance to the Long Trail. It was around 2:30 p.m. when she started her hike, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Knapp later said she seemed happy, and nothing about her behavior raised any red flags. Other people saw her that day too. A group of older hikers recalled passing Paula as she walked along the trail, heading deeper into the woods. They remembered her red coat. It was hard to miss against the stark, wintry landscape. They didn't chat with her, but she smiled and nodded as they passed. She didn't seem lost or distressed. She was just another person out enjoying the day. But that would be the last time anyone ever saw Paula Jean Weldon. When she didn't return to campus that night, no one thought too much of it at first. Paula was known for her adventurous spirit, and it wasn't unusual for students to stay out late or change plans without letting people know. But as the night stretched on and the next morning came without any sign of her, her friends started to worry. They reached out to the school, and by the afternoon, the authorities were alerted. A search was quickly organized. Police, volunteers, and even Paula's parents came to Bennington to help. Paula's father, William Archibald Weldon, was particularly distraught. He and his wife had dropped their daughter off at college just months earlier, and now she was missing in the wilderness. The search focused on the area around Bickford Hollow, where Paula had been dropped off, and the nearby portions of the Long Trail. At first, searchers were hopeful. After all, how far could she have gone? It was broad daylight when she started her hike, and the trail was well traveled. But as the hours ticked by and darkness fell, their optimism began to fade. The weather was turning colder, and Paula wasn't dressed for a long night outdoors. They combed through the forest calling her name, hoping to spot her red coat against the snowy trees. But there was nothing. The search stretched into the next day, and then the next. Day after day, volunteers and law enforcement scoured the area, but not a single clue turned up. Paula had vanished without a trace. As word of her disappearance spread, more people came to help, including experienced woodsmen and state police. They brought dogs, hoping they could pick up her scent, but the dogs couldn't find a trail to follow. It was as if she had just disappeared into thin air. Paula's father was devastated. He threw himself into the search, even going as far as to hire private detectives. He couldn't understand how his daughter, a healthy, smart young woman, could just vanish on a popular trail so close to town. The lack of any physical evidence was especially troubling. There were no footprints, no pieces of clothing, no broken branches, nothing. The case soon drew national attention, and the media swarmed Bennington. The more people heard about the case, the more theories started to swirl. Some thought Paula had simply gotten lost, maybe wandered off the trail and succumbed to the elements. Others thought she might have slipped into a ravine or fallen into a river. But without any evidence, these ideas were just guesses. Rumors also started to circulate, as they often do in these kinds of cases. Some speculated that Paula had run away, that maybe she'd decided to start a new life somewhere else. Others whispered about foul play, suggesting she'd been abducted or met with some kind of violence. One theory involved a mysterious man who had been spotted lurking in the area around the time Paula disappeared, but no solid leads ever came from that. Months passed, and the search eventually scaled back. Paula's family was heartbroken, but they continued to hold out hope that she would be found. Archibald Weldon remained in Bennington for weeks, personally overseeing the search and speaking to anyone who might have information. But despite his efforts, no answers came. By spring, the case had grown cold. The woods, which had been blanketed in snow when Paula disappeared, began to thaw, and searchers hoped that the melting snow might reveal some clue, but nothing surfaced. Paula was gone, and no one could explain how or why. As the years went on, Paula's disappearance became one of Vermont's most infamous unsolved cases. It was the second mysterious disappearance in the Bennington Triangle, and it wouldn't be the last. Over the next few years, several more people would vanish in the same area, leading many to believe that something strange, maybe even supernatural, was at play. The locals, who had long whispered about the strange happenings in Glastonbury Mountain, felt their suspicions were confirmed. The area had a dark, eerie history, and Paula's disappearance only added to the mystery. Her case remains unsolved to this day. There are no answers, no closure for her family, and no way to explain what happened that cold December afternoon in 1946. Paula Jean Weldon walked into the woods and never came back, leaving behind nothing but questions that continue to haunt the town of Bennington and everyone who hears her story.